881-6858 today. Spectrum Business, made to work.
Got some soup for you.
You are loved. You are valued. You are resilient. You got this.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving.
Good evening, I'm Errol Lewis, and you are watching Spectrum News coverage of the Democratic National Convention. It is 8 p.m. on the East Coast, 5 on the West Coast, and 7 p.m. in Chicago, where they are celebrating day 2 of the convention. It's underway at the United Center, and so is the ceremonial roll call, which will end with California about an hour from now. Tonight's theme is a bold vision for America's future. The main headliners for tonight include Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff and former First Lady Michelle Obama and former President Barack Obama. We'll be seeing Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, once again tonight, but they're not going to be at the convention in Chicago. Instead, the two are holding a campaign rally in nearby Milwaukee. That's going to happen about an hour from now, and we'll bring that to you as well. It's being held at the same venue, by the way, the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee, where Republicans held their convention last month. Now, if you stayed with our entire coverage last night, you know it was a late night or an early morning, depending on how you think about it, on the East Coast. DNC organizers say, though, that will probably not be the case tonight. They kicked things off earlier today, worked with the speakers and made some other adjustments in order to keep things on track. We will see. So let's head inside the United Center and check in with Spectrum News anchor and chief national political reporter Josh Robin and national political reporter Taylor Popolars. Taylor, let's start with you. What can we expect to hear from the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and from the Obamas tonight?
Well, Errol, from Mr. Emhoff, you're of course going to hear him talk about his wife and try to humanize her a bit, even though she's been vice president for 3.5 years. This week, in many ways, is a reintroduction of Kamala Harris to the United States and to the world stage as she takes over as the leader of the party. And Second Gentleman Emhoff has spent the last 3.5 years as her chief cheerleader, instead of a chief of staff, chief cheerleader. And so I think we've received some excerpts where he talks about just how proud he is of her, how he's been proud to step away from his career and kind of let her dominate and let her kind of lead the country in this way. So it'll be interesting to hear from him in that sense. Obviously, both of the Obamas speaking, they're the big headliners that were in their hometown of Chicago, and former President Barack Obama was a history maker in his own right, and he'll be able to kind of talk about passing that type of torch to Vice President Harris as she attempts to be a history-making candidate in her own right. And as for the former First Lady Michelle Obama, she doesn't speak a lot publicly, so it'll be really interesting to hear what she has to say. We also expect to hear from a wide range of senators and governors, from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Senator Tammy Duckworth, to New York Senator Chuck Schumer. So a full night ahead.
All right, thanks. Let's listen in a little bit. They are doing the roll call of states. They're up to Washington, D.C. Let's listen in.
Your vote.
Florida is worth fighting for. That's why we're fighting back against Project 2025 and Republican extremism. We won't go back. We won't back down. I cast 4 votes present and 243 votes in the great state of Florida for the first
right, so they're going through all of this, and Josh, there's a symbolic nature to all of this, although it is following the format that we've seen at past conventions.
That's right. I'm kind of thinking back to original conventions, going back, obviously ones that we didn't cover, talking about generations ago, and just wondering, and just kind of marveling at how things have changed and become high tech. I would say, like in the 40 convention, 44 convention, we didn't see something like this, where, people kind of give a little shout out to their state. Particularly, they get, I think, more time. If you're a state like Georgia that's actually in play, then that can swing the election to Democrats. This is definitely something different. I haven't seen something like this before, and I've seen a lot of roll calls over the years. But basically, Errol, what's happening is that this is a way of just reaffirming for a TV audience what we already know, which is that Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee. This was done, frankly, this was done in a very quick way after Joe Biden backed down. It was affirmed by computer and in recent weeks, and this is just for the cameras now. Again, this is really extraordinary. I wonder what's going to happen in 4, 8, 12 years. This is really the metamorphosis of what's usually, or what has traditionally been, kind of a state affair, a patriotic affair, but a state affair of determining who's going to be the next president.
Yeah, Lil Jon just came out to introduce the Georgia delegation. This is really quite something, and quite a change, as you say, from past conventions when actually casting the ballots was the way that you would find out who had enough ballots to be the nominee. This is largely symbolic. Now, Josh, Democrats are actually mixing things up a little bit. In fact, there's a Harris and Walz campaign rally happening in about an hour from now, miles away in Milwaukee. I dare say the Democrats are sort of trying to get under the skin of Donald Trump and the Republicans by going back to the place where the Republicans held their convention just a few weeks ago.
Yes, that's definitely going to happen, in the sense that I think it will. I'm pretty sure it will get under his skin, because Donald Trump has long talked about crowd size, and that he had bigger crowds, and that it was actually AI that is what people are seeing, which is just factually inaccurate. This is another metamorphosis that we've seen over the years. Again, these conventions were really the way that people selected a nominee. That's changed since the early 70s, and they were all in one spot. In fact, it usually was like a hotel ballroom until recently. Now it's arenas. This is the latest change, Errol, which is that candidates over the years have kind of done something to change things up. Perhaps most famously was 2008, when Barack Obama had the convention in one place in Denver, but then his speech was in a bigger venue, the football stadium. In this situation here, Kamala Harris is leaving the convention city and going, and went actually, because she's already landed 90 miles north in Milwaukee, and is having this rally at the same place, as you mentioned, where the RNC was held. Now, I talked to one of Harris's chief pollsters today, and I said, this is obviously just about getting under Donald Trump's skin, right? And he assured me that this is actually also about, and he insisted mostly about, just rallying in a swing state. Illinois is not in play for Republicans. Wisconsin certainly is. So they were able to go up there and kind of do this programming that augments what you're seeing here. And all the better, I think Democrats would say, that it was actually the same place where the Republicans had their convention, which is the Fiserv Forum. So now you see two arenas that are packed. One of them happened to be where Trump got his nomination. I haven't seen anything from Trump on Truth Social yet, but this is just a way, I think, also to not only get the very, very important city to be even more motivated, but to rattle your opponent. And if past is prologue, Donald Trump will take the bait and will be rattled by this.
Yeah, it's a real show of strength that they can pull it off, to fill not one but two arenas on the same night. And as you say, Wisconsin, which was, I guess, a margin of something like 21,000, 22,000 votes, almost that many people can fit into the Fiserv Arena. So, well, we'll see how that all works. Let's go to Kevin Fry. He's down on the floor there at the convention where the symbolic roll call is taking place. Kevin, what's the scene like down there?
I mean, to say that it's electric here on the floor, I think would be an understatement. People are going insane as this really plays out in such a creative way that is quite unique. If you remember, just 4 years ago, they were in the midst of the pandemic and they had to operate in this strange space where they went across the country. This time they have wristbands that are lighting up in certain ways to match the flag colors, and they're trying to really make this quite a unique celebration. As you mentioned already, we already had Lil Jon coming down. Now, we are with the California delegation because they are going to be the group that sets Kamala Harris over the top. This is tradition. She is from California, and that's how this is, traditionally plays out. The home state is the one that kind of gives them that final edge to be the nominee. One of the delegates we're with is Terry Lissagore. She is, this is your second time at a convention. Last time was when Obama was nominated. You're about to hear from him tonight.
Yes.
What are you hoping to hear from him?
I am hoping to hear 100% support of Kamala Harris, the next president of the United States of America.
You're a fan of Kamala Harris from California. What do you make of her trajectory and what she did back home?
I think that Kamala has proven herself to be such a sincere, real, bright, hopeful, humanitarian woman, and I am thrilled to be alive to experience her being our next president of the United States. It means the world to me and to our future.
Now, you are a retired teacher.
Yes.
She has picked a former teacher as her vice president. Was that a good choice?
It was the perfect choice. I think in Tim Walz, he's got such humility, which matches hers. He's got this look about him that when he speaks from his heart. And you can feel that. He's got this long history of connection. And he is, you can tell some teachers are born to be teachers, and that is how I see Tim Walz.
Terry, I appreciate your time. You have to get back in line and wait because California actually skipped their roll call because they're waiting to be the ones that ceremoniously puts her over the top. So Terry, I'll let you go back and get excited. Thank you so much for chatting with us. But as you can see, I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, but the excitement level is truly off the charts, Harold.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, we've got Indiana casting their votes now. They've got an actor, Sean Astin, there, who's sort of part of it. Let's listen to this for a minute.
Rudy. I want what's best for Indiana, and that means electing Kamala Harris, the first woman president of the United States of America.
On behalf of the great Hoosier State, home of the largest single sporting day event in the world, the Indy 500, home of Michael Jackson, home of Babyface, home of David Letterman, Indiana delivers its 86 delegates to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as the next president and vice president.
Yeah, you know, they'll tell her they'll never be able to convince people that this was purely symbolic. Anybody who was there is going to feel like they cast their vote, they did their part, they were part of history in the making.
How do you cast your vote?
Yeah, and it's weird that this is ceremonial, but it all had to do with paperwork, and it all had to do with the state of Ohio and their timeline for when they had to get their ballots in order to have a successful election this November. So, like many things in 2020, the actual roll call took place over Zoom a couple of weeks ago, but the Democrats said we still want to have a party while we're here and give each state and territory its kind of opportunity and moment in the spotlight. So that's what's playing out right now. I also think it's worthwhile, Errol, to point out that one of the unique things about this convention is that the Democrats are really trying to tap into the influencer economy, and they've credentialed over 200 content creators who are separate from regular members of the media like us, who have a pretty prime location down on the convention floor. And these are TikTok stars, Instagram stars, and they have been given kind of unfiltered access to this convention. And the Harris campaign talks a lot about how, and mind you, all the Harris campaign staffers are the same ones who were working for President Joe Biden's campaign before he dropped out, but these staffers talk all the time about how the media environment is changing, and they want something like this convention to not just be broadcast on television or on the radio or printed in newspapers, but they want it to be in TikTok, and they want it to be on Instagram, and they want these moments like Lil Jon walking out on stage to go viral so that people feel like they could be a part of it if they weren't here. So I think it's just another reminder that the Harris campaign is very, very intentionally trying to reach out to younger voters, trying to energize a base that President Biden was really struggling with. And right now the party feels really good about kind of the strategy that they're taking.
All right, thanks for that. Taylor, we'll be back with you in a couple of minutes, of course. Let's talk to Alex Cohen, who is out in California. And Alex, this whole spectacle is very highly produced in a way that some of those folks in Hollywood that you've covered over the years, I sense their hand behind this with the DJ and the coordinated music and the colors and the lights and the stars popping out in the middle of this.
Absolutely, Errol. I mean, I think a couple of factors are at play here, right? Last night, as we all know, we all talked about, got a little bit long. Folks got tired. I think the organizers, there have been reports that one of the main producers, advisor Stephanie Cutter, called folks today speaking and said, trim up those speeches, keep it short and snappy. I also am thinking a lot about the pandemic. Remember the roll call for the DNC back in 2020 when we were all social distancing? There were these videos we heard from delegates across the country, and that was so different and so inspiring. I think, you know, there was no going back. So they're looking to top that this year while keeping some of the traditional conventions. And then, yes, this Hollywood element, Sean Astin, you know, popping up there from Indiana, Lil Jon coming down the aisles. And I gotta say, my spidey senses are tingling. I think this is just the beginning. I think we can expect more surprises tonight, and I think we'll expect each night to grow kind of more enthusiastic. You know, this is the energy and the turnaround. I heard one person describe it as if, you know, the can's kind of been ripped off, and now this excitement is pouring forth from the Democrats.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine this constellation of stars and activity and the bloggers and the social influencers and so forth all being there for Joe Biden. It's an interesting thought experiment to wonder how this all would have felt if you'd had Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. Let's go to Cleveland, where Curtis Jackson is our anchor who's been following much of this. And talk a little bit, Curtis, about those who want a change in policy, in particular on foreign policy, when it comes to how the U.S. is dealing with the war between Israel and Hamas.
Certainly, we're seeing the protesters outside the United Center. That has been the primary focus of them, trying to make sure that that message is still out there. We did hear current President Joe Biden address that issue in passing last night when he said that those protesters had a point. And that he did want to see a solution, and that he and Vice President Harris were working toward a solution to getting a ceasefire in Gaza. So that international pressure is still there, and keeping in mind some of the history here. 1968, Chicago, a lot of protests over the Vietnam War. We have not seen any sort of escalation or explosion of that sort of opposition thus far. It's been a very successful convention in that way, but it still looms over the convention. The fact that this issue is so very important to so many of the people that are part of the Democratic base, largest Palestinian community in the country in Chicago, that also adds to a lot of this. So we're seeing a lot of history and current events sort of combining here, colliding here in some very special ways. But there's always that question out there about how much longer can this good time continue not just now, but after the convention, especially when there are so many pressing issues that are out there that are on the minds of so many. I will point this out to you, too, before I wrap up. Taylor Swift is originally from Pennsylvania, so who knows? If Lil Jon could show up, you know, it's possible that maybe Tay-Tay might make an appearance in some way or another. I don't know.
You know, you raise an interesting point. I mean, look, there's what looks like kind of wild energy in that arena, but we should keep in mind this is not just a random group of people who filled an arena. All of these people are either elected officials or political organizers, donors, activists of one kind or another. The question becomes, can they translate all of this fun and excitement and cheering into concerted political action after this convention is over?
Yeah, and I'll be curious to find out how much of a bump they get out of this. There's always that traditional bump that you get out of a convention. There's been some debate out there as to whether or not the Harris-Walz ticket has already gotten that bump with all of the enthusiasm and energy that has led to this point. Significantly seen successful campaigns really get up and running after these conventions. So these moments that they're trying to create here, and as Taylor mentioned, courtesy of the state of Ohio in some ways, as the pressure to get somebody on the ballot here is the reason that we're looking at this ceremonial event. Getting that energy and continuing that on after the campaign, that's got to be the main goal. But for now, you know, let the party continue.
Yeah, I mean, let's go to Tim in Raleigh. And Tim, what do you make of this? I don't even know how to describe it other than a party that's going on, this concert and party going on in Chicago.
Yeah, on the surface it looks like it's just a party, but I actually think in places like North Carolina, what you're seeing right now is super important. After 2020, Democrats lost in North Carolina by some 74,000 votes. And obviously with COVID, they weren't able to get out as much as they wanted to. Republicans still did in North Carolina. Sort of the autopsy was that made all the difference. And so what you're seeing right now is this excitement and energy that I think a lot of Democrats need in North Carolina if they want to win, to get out there and do this. I talked to the Harris-Walz National Campaign Communications Director today about this exact point, about how you translate from this now in August into September and October. And they said, look, we got to get out there and continue this and push forward. And the last time the Democrats won in North Carolina was 2008, and that was with Barack Obama. And how did he do it? Young voters. They were all over college campuses across North Carolina for months leading up to the election. And so I think if what you're seeing tonight can translate to that energy onto college campuses and in places where Barack Obama succeeded, it really can make a difference. So I think this is much more than just a ceremonious, fun event tonight, potentially for the campaign. But as we've been talking about it really matters when they actually put it to action here after Labor Day.
Josh Robin, you were inside the arena at the RNC, the Republican National Convention. How would you compare that to this? I mean, it's different people rallying around a different leader, but I don't know. What are your impressions?
My impressions are, excuse me, Earl, that the RNC was very crisp. There was a lot of enthusiasm there. It was a different type of enthusiasm. It didn't do something, I guess, as original as what we're seeing here. But remember, there was a lot of affection for Donald Trump, particularly at that time. He had just survived an assassination attempt. So I thought that the first 3.5 days of the RNC were really, really on target and just, exceptionally well done, crisp, energetic. Then, of course, there was the former president's speech about halfway into it, but that's a topic for another day. Two things are really sticking out here, which we've kind of talked about. One is, what would this have looked like if Joe Biden were the nominee? It would not have looked like this. This is electric here. It's really amazing that they were able to make this pivot this quickly. The second one is just following up on Tim, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Errol, and others, is I think that Democrats also know that they need to be cautious about this, about moving things into the realm of celebrity. And actually, a number of celebrities, apparently, according to reports, were turned away here. They don't want this to be too out of touch for the average American. At the same time, as Tim was just mentioning, They really need to get everyone here super motivated to go back to their districts, particularly if you live in one of 7 swing states, and knock on doors and tell your neighbors, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a double-edged sword here, and after this, there might be a tone down of the celebrities, at least for a moment. I think that they're really trying to mix in normal, everyday Americans and and the rah-rah Democratic, hardcore, Hollywood, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's some serious messaging. Last night when they started talking about abortion rights, and there were families that were sharing some very gripping personal stories, a lot of the energy just flowed right out of the room. I mean, it's kind of a hard balance to strike. Let's head over to our Cassie Semyon. She covers the Harris campaign for Spectrum News. She generally covers California politics. We're going to be hearing from the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, later tonight. What can you tell us about him? He's relatively unknown to many Americans, but we're going to meet him tonight, I guess.
Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, he is someone who is a very close confidant, obviously, of the vice president when it comes to policy. And as Taylor alluded to before, he's kind of the cheerleader in chief of the vice president. He's often seen on TV at the State of the Union waving to her from the box, being his goofy self. And his son Cole is going to actually introduce him in a video, introducing the world to his dad. Harris has really relied on Emhoff to take on some policy when it comes to anti-Semitism, addressing the rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen in this country over the last several years. He's made it a core mission of his work as the nation's first second gentleman. He's also a teacher. He teaches at Georgetown as a visiting law professor, giving up his law career back in California when Harris became the vice president, so there were no conflicts of interest there. So this is really his moment to shine, to introduce the world to his wife, the woman he met 11 years ago, married 10 years ago. And it's interesting, a little trivia here for you. The Emhoff-Harris couple celebrate their wedding anniversary on Thursday, their 10th anniversary, and that is the night that Harris will accept the nomination officially as presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. So a big night for their family. I do want to mention, though, there was a little bit of scrutiny on Emhoff. Earlier this month, it did come out that he had an extramarital affair when he was married to his first wife. He did put out a statement quite quickly after that report saying, there were troubles in our marriage. We have worked through them, and we are now a strong family. We co-parent our 2 adult children, and that Kamala was very much a part of co-parenting their 2 kids, Cole and Ella. And it is worth mentioning that Emhoff's first wife, Kirsten, is here at the DNC as an advocate for the Harris-Walz ticket. She is out here campaigning hard for what her kids call Mamala, Kamala's nickname for Cole, from Cole and Ella. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic of this blended family, a family that looks so much like many families across America, on that stage when she accepts the nomination on Thursday night.
Okay, thank you for that, Cassie. And as a note for our viewers, some of our Spectrum stations are going to change back to regular programming, but the rest, we're going to stay right here and continue talking about the convention, and we'll be back a little later for those who do leave us. Now, we were just talking about North Carolina with Tim Boyum. Guess where our roving reporter Kevin Fry is right now? Kevin, who do you have with you there?
Well, actually, we're one row over, which is actually with Wisconsin, which is another key battleground state that we're keeping an eye on heading into November. And as you can see, there are quite a few cheeseheads around. They're really quite celebrating their state this evening as they get ready to cast their vote in just a few moments. Now, we are joined by the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Ben Wickler. I hope I'm saying everything correctly. What have you seen since Kamala Harris has turned out to be the head of this ticket?
There's been this explosion of enthusiasm and joy. We've seen in every corner of Wisconsin, in rural areas and small towns and big towns and suburbs, people coming out of the woodwork to volunteer. There's so much pent-up demand for yard signs that I don't know if the printers will be able to meet the demand once those signs start rolling off the shelves. We've had more volunteers sign up to join this campaign since Harris became the nominee than 2 times Joe Biden's margin of victory from 2020. 42,000 people have signed up to help, and this is just the beginning. You can see tonight in Fiserv Forum, the photos coming out of there mirrors the energy here in the hall at the Democratic National Convention.
Well, and Ben, just to give some context there, is referring to the fact that Kamala Harris is about to have a rally in the same forum where the RNC was held just a few weeks ago. In terms of Wisconsin's importance in this election, can you stress that?
Yes, so there's maybe 3 states that are the contenders to be the tipping point state, the state that actually tips the winner over the top. And Wisconsin was the tipping point state in 2016 and 2020, and it might well be the single most important state in 2024. That's why you've seen Harris and Walz come to our state, 12,000 people in Eau Claire. That's why Harris came to Wisconsin first after she became the nominee, and that's why she's there tonight.
Confident are you that this will stay blue?
This is going to be a fight. No one should take this race for granted. What I will say is that this race is now within the margin of effort. If everyone who is screaming for joy tonight, if everyone who's sitting at home watching this convention with a grin on their face, then gets out and talks to their friends and neighbors, maybe knocks on a few doors, then we're going to win this election.
Do you need... how do you make of how Kamala Harris has handled the first few weeks since this all launched? Does she need to do more policy statements? What else could she do to try to convince voters that might